Welcome to another episode of Treknicity, a Star Trek podcast, where we trip the not-so-light fantastic while doing the deep dive on all things Trek. I'm Lars.
And I'm Patrick, and I liked it more when you fumbled through it because then I could really make fun of you and
What
just
does it
yeah,
matter?
you know.
You're gonna make fun of me anyway, so it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
At least I sound like I can actually speak in coherent statements.
Sure you do. Sure. We'll
Uh-huh.
just go with that.
Sure.
Sure.
In this
Anyway,
episode, we're going to take a brief look at Star Trek Deep Space Nine, a Star Trek show that premiered in 1993, based on a station with ongoing story arcs and a great war, wholly not inspired by any of the other shows at the time.
and at the same time, we're going to take a brief look at Babylon 5, a non-Star Trek show that premiered in 1993, based around a station with ongoing story arcs and a Grey War, which may have been tapped to create a Trek show in its image. Now, if you know the controversy, if you know the small amount of controversy they had back in the day, yeah, there was a. So I'll just go in that first because that's why we're talking about these, because these are two series that premiered the same year. Babylon 5 was the second of the two, and DS9 was the first of the two. But the whole thing was that J. Michael Straczynski, the guy who created Babylon 5, brought his show Bible and his pitch to Paramount, who was at that point cranking through seasons of Next Generation. He presented them, tried to sell the studio on buying it. So, and it was supposed to give them the entire course of the series. They declined, and then announced a show called Star Trek Deep Space Nine, which was pretty much the same kind of idea. That would take place on a station, there'd be an ongoing longer story arcs. And while there are some differences, Straczynski pointed out a lot of episodes seem to mine his material to come up with plots for DS9.
Well, yeah,
Which,
I mean they made the cardinal mistake of basically, if I remember correctly, he gave them a series Bible, gave them breakdowns of stories, characters, and the general all-rounded look of what the series would do over the course of its run. Now, I'm no genius, but I'm pretty sure that while it's may not be ethical, he's kind of asking for it.
yes and no. I mean, usually when you present something, you don't expect them to take and say, "Hey, let's just steal something. Let's just steal the let's steal the series and make our own version of it."
Kind of
And to be
reminds.
fair, Babylon 5 and DS9 are two very different they're very different series. When you really get down to it, they have different story arcs, different resolutions, and it's kind of interesting.
Well, it's a good example also of how you can take very similar concepts and build them in different ways, go in different directions, and have two very distinct sci-fi series.
Yep. And so let's just talk about them because I have never actually gotten through all of DS9. I'm kind of stalled on that because I started watching other things, and some of the first couple seasons are a fucking slog. I mean, it's just why. Yeah.
Well, I mean, and that is something that almost every single Star Trek series has suffered from, with a few exceptions. Um,
Yeah.
the first series of the original series, sorry, the first season of the original series, was a bit of an uphill slog, but it did have its shining moments. The first season of TNG was a complete uphill slog. Did
What a
not even
mess.
did not even start reaching its stride until season three.
Yeah. And
DS9
so,
suffered the
yeah.
same thing.
Although DS9 did a little bit better from the start because it had a lot of things like heavy religious themes built into it, mainly through the Bajorans. It, yeah, it. There were a lot of things that really drove it.
Right.
So
It did, but you're right. It built off the successes of the now in their stride TNG. Voyager built on the goodwill of where DS9 was, although they were
Somehow
pretty
didn't
close
blow
together.
up.
Right. Enterprise has suffered the same problem. The first season was okay. Second season was okay. Third season was not okay. Fourth season was amazing. So again, everything finds its own stride at its own time. And of course, then you got the likes of Discovery, Picard,
Oh.
and Strange New Worlds, Lower Decks, and Prodigy. All of them suffered from some initial, having to prove themselves and find their footing.
Strange
Babylon,
New Worlds didn't. I mean, we've got one season, and holy crap, if season 2's better than this, yeah.
well, I mean, and to be fair, Lower Decks had the same thing going for it. It came out of the gates running.
Yeah. Although as it went along, it got better, obviously.
God,
And
that's
Discovery just had to get out of just had to get to its own time so it could do something.
right. So,
And then there's Picard.
yeah.
Okay, so let's continue. Let's talk about
Yeah, let's talk about these two particular series.
yeah. So let's start off with give me the basic. Let's start off with the basic premise of DS9, and then I'll follow up with B5. We'll kind of back and forth on this.
Okay, so the initial concept or the general concept of Deep Space Nine is that a planet that was originally mentioned in Next Generation, which was Bajor, they have a Cardassian space station around it called Empok Nor.
Eric Nor.
Excuse me, thank you, Tarak Nor. And ends up becoming redesignated when the Cardassians basically beat feet. The Federation come in as a protectorate to help run the station of the newly liberated Bajor. They come up there. They find out that there is a stable wormhole, and the station now becomes a center point for the mingling of species from several different cultures. Starfleet, the Bajorans, who factor in religion a lot through the prophets, and then you've got all the other species that come in. Think of it like basically Vegas in space.
Yeah. Babylon 5, fairly similar. I'm just going to grab season 1's intro. It was the dawn of the third age of mankind, 10 years after the Earth-Minbari War. The Babylon Project was a dream given form. Its goal to prevent another war by creating a place where humans and aliens could work out their differences peacefully. Of course, that changes over the 5-season runtime, where it turns out that Babylon 5 becomes a place that's the center point of a fight between an Earth Civil War, a war of ancient aliens, and ultimately the third age of mankind really begins in season 4.
So the
Yeah.
way I see it, JMS took the time to build in some backstory, because obviously you're talking about the Babylon station number 5, and he built in the backstory. The first 3 basically during construction were basically sabotaged and destroyed. The fourth,
And we can't talk about Babylon 4 because there's spoilers involving that one.
right,
Big spoilers.
and then Babylon 5 is, of course, the center of this story. But he, like I said, he built in all this pre-existing backstory for the Babylon project, whereas there really wasn't that much backstory built for Deep Space Nine, other than the fact that they used the previously established Bajorans and Cardassians, and that's kind of it. I mean, then they
Like in a wormhole.
right, and then they picked up from there. There isn't like they don't go back through another series of deep space stations that came first. This is just one of many deep space stations that are out there.
Yeah. So yeah, that would be probably the biggest difference. Is Babylon 5 was conceived beginning to end one major story with a lot of filler and the usual stuff that you have network TV of the 90s. And boy, does it show its age. Of course, all the shows show their age from the 90s.
Yeah, but still, like, I mean, I'm not that big of a fan of Babylon 5 now. I think it's just because I haven't taken the time to go back and appreciate the complexities and the richness of the stories that they came up with. But when I was a kid and watching the first season, I thought it was amazing. I was so blown away by
The first was the worst.
the then cutting edge computer graphics.
Yeah, they don't hold up in a lot of cases. But yeah, that's one of the big things. DS9, for the most part, still held to the Trek standard of practical models, where Babylon 5 pretty much started with digital models, and over the seasons and subsequent TV movies, they got better and better and better.
Yeah, I mean, so again, there's another point of divergence between the two series, and I think both have their relative strength.
Although another point of similarity, both of them when they get their really cool ship, they get better. In the Defiant for DS9 and the first White Star for Babylon 5, which is I think season 3. Yeah, season 3. Babylon 5 wait a minute, DS9 gets theirs in season 3 as well?
I don't exactly recall when the Defiant shows up.
You're no fun. Supposed to remember that shit. So, but yeah, obviously we're not going to get into the deep plot of both series because most of the Trekkies should be familiar with this one, with DS9 and Babylon 5. If you haven't experienced, you should probably watch it, because every revival I hear of kind of is dying. So it's probably it probably won't make the light of day for a long, long, long time if it does.
Yeah, I mean, it's primarily the purpose of this discussion is to show how they both came out around the same time. They both had very similar concepts, but they both took them in their own directions. And despite that, they still managed to share a number of elements, specifically certain actors.
Oh yeah, let's talk about those. Let me see here. Probably one of my favorites. Andreas Katsoulis, known for Commander Tomalak, came on as Jakar and knocked it out of the park 1,000 times. Actually, I think almost everybody that appears in Star Trek and then goes and also Babylon 5, I think they do better in Babylon 5. For example, one of the big guns, Walter Koenig.
Right. Although was not an actor on Deep Space Nine, it was a Star Trek crossover.
Yeah. And and a lot of these are going to be I don't think there are really too many crossovers from DS9 to Babylon 5. There were a lot of crossovers from Trek in general. Patricia Tallman was in the one episode where an episode of TNG where they were scanning the ship and Picard was trapped on there. She died, of course. She's a major player for most of Babylon 5 as Lita Alexander, a telepath. Which let me bring back Walter Koenig, who of course was Chekhov, and is probably most famously known for that. Although as the Psychop Albester, he was 1,000 times better than anything I can possibly imagine that Star Trek ever did with him, to be honest.
I'll be interested to see. Because I do have a plan at some point to go back and try to rewatch the series, and see just how well they did with it throughout its run of 5 seasons.
Yeah, it was 5 seasons, and you can kind of skim through the first season a little bit because that's rough. And season 5 is one of those truncated things because due to the way things were going, Straczynski had to try to compress his primary story into 4 years and then come up with a 5th season when he got the 5th season, which he used to fill things out. So at the end of season 4, there is a series finale, but then season 5 there is another series finale.
I see. So,
But they make it work, and it is really really good. So
and the same thing with with Deep Space Nine, they take for the first time in Star Trek history, they take a very very dark turn in the Trek universe, where you have a franchise where open war is depicted. It's always been referred to allegorically in the previous series, about wars that happened in the past. We hadn't seen an open war until Deep Space Nine, when we had the Dominion War, and they did a really good job of I guess pulling that entire story, story arc across several seasons, and then still managed to wrap it up nicely when they were done.
So yeah, we have. So yeah, overall, both series have their pluses and minuses, and I think if you want to complete your '90s viewing and you've already finished DS9, Babylon 5 is something to check out. I know it's on HBO Max currently, whereas of course you can go to Paramount Minus for, DS9. And I'm going to call it Paramount Minus because, unfortunately, I have to see all the other crap that they have on there. Like spending 2 minutes to try to get into an episode of Prodigy, which I think we're going to have to talk about that because I finally finished the first season, and yeah, yay. It was awesome.
Yeah, we'll definitely be covering the first season of Prodigy as a whole, over in a later episode of Treknicity. So, sort of, despite the fact that both series had their own strengths and weaknesses, went their own direction, and managed to be very similar and different at the same time, and diverging in very interesting ways, there was still a fair amount of, I guess, animosity between the two franchises. And some
rivalry and that shit, yeah. So that brings us to season 3, the episode name I can't remember because I keep losing track.
Point of No Return.
Point of No Return, which is set in the middle of Earth declaring martial law, everything going to hell, and Babylon 5 being on the precipice, that's the next episode, of breaking away from Earth and shit getting really, really different. One of the races, the Centauri, the ambassador there, Lando Malari, invites the third wife of Emperor Turhan, who died in season 2, to come because she's also a seer. She was played by the one and only Majel Barrett herself, she came on as an olive branch to say that both of them can have the same space and we can both exist in series, and kind of just to chill everything out. And I think it was mainly a point of reconciliation, and I don't think it completely reconciled everything behind the scenes, but it was a good thing to say, yeah, we've got somebody who's been in DS9, now in Babylon 5, and obviously the wife of Gene Roddenberry. Yeah, if she shows up on your show's probably okay on the Trek side.
Yeah, true.
That's where we left it.
I mean, it was like I said, an olive branch to try to heal the rift between the two franchises, which, again, when you deal with the creative types in Hollywood, and then you're dealing with the kind of money that would have been spent to develop these series, and the kind of money that's being made by studios and
scumbag executives.
Yeah,
fuck Lottie.
And that being said, it's this thing where you know that when you have such a point of contention, there's going to be some bad blood, and you're really never ever going to get over it. You might be able to patch it up and limp along, or kind of eventually, when things are done, you can kind of get past it. But there's never really, there's never going to be any real healing of those wounds because of the nature of the business. But still, if there was somebody to attempt it and who had a chance of doing some good, Major Barrett Roddenberry was definitely one of those people that could do that.
And that's pretty much, I think, where we can leave it. So
absolutely. If you agree with what we're saying, please let us know. If you don't, let us know. As always, you can see us down here on these places on the bottom. I'm pointing. That's where you find us on social media. We encourage you to leave us messages, to comment, to like, subscribe, all that good stuff. Watch our other videos. Tell us what you think, and yeah, and if you have any ideas for future episodes where you want us to talk about a specific topic regarding Star Trek or its place in science fiction, we're more than happy to listen.
We need ideas. Help! Oh wait, sorry, just lost it there.
So that's all the time we have for this episode of Treknicity. Again, please make sure to like and subscribe. Follow us on social media. All the links are here at the bottom. As always, we encourage you to rock out with your Spock out here on Treknicity. I'm Lars.
I'm Patrick.
See you next time.